I sang that song for more than 60 years, a song of praise to Joseph Smith, the prophet of the Restoration and founder of the LDS Church, the church I served as a bishop for 5 years. I knew the church was true. I was a faithful Latter-day Saint. My life has been built on certain truths, but wishing doesn't change the truth. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free." When I finally learned the truth about the real history and doctrines of Mormonism, I realized that I was following the gospel of Joseph Smith and not the gospel of Jesus Christ. I have come to learn that many others have made a similar journey out of the bondage of religion and into an authentic relationship with Jesus. And that's what this show is all about. Courageous people who want to share their story, hoping that you, the viewer, will discover the same new life in Jesus. So if you're a Latter-day Saint who is struggling with questions or seeking a genuine encounter with the Savior, we invite you to join us tonight. We have a joyful message that we want to share with you. Hi, welcome to the Ex-Mormon Files here in the heart of Salt Lake City. I'm your host, Bishop Earl, and I appreciate you spending some time watching our show. Tonight I'm really excited to introduce to you Sherry Wimmer. And Sherry, appreciate you coming and sharing your story.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, this should be very interesting. You've been a lifelong member of the church, is that right?
I have. I was born and raised in it. My parents were active.
Where were you born?
I was actually born in Arizona. My dad was in the Air Force, but most of my life was spent here in Utah. So.
Okay. Very active family and
very active family.
The old family home evenings and everything.
My parents tried that occasionally. It didn't really fly.
To get started, and then I know how that went.
We attempted family prayers here and there, but we were active.
Yeah.
But we weren't by the book.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dad was in a bishopric, I understand.
Yes. My dad, I think I was maybe in my early teens, maybe later teens, I can't recall exactly, but he was a counselor in the bishopric.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because at that point in time, then appearances really mattered. I remember one time I was wanting to be out in the yard in the sunshine on a Sunday, and so I thought I'd maybe pull some weeds for my mom, and that was a big no-no.
That didn't go over too well.
No, it didn't.
It was on a Sunday.
But and we were the type of family that went boating on Sunday and
on vacations.
Yes, on vacations. So
that's interesting.
But that mattered when he was in the bishopric. It was kind of a change in our family's life.
Interesting. And you took seminary, I guess.
I took seminary, all 4 years of high school, and graduated from that.
Yeah. I guess there was never any question the church wasn't true, right?
No, in fact, I was a person that others looked as an example. I guess I really was into the church. I really believed it and lived it, and
it's all we knew, right?
Right.
I mean, we just grew up with it, and it was went to church every Sunday and heard the lessons and everything, and just kind of did our thing. And you actually went through the temple at age 20 before you were married.
I did.
What prompted that?
I just was really into the church. I had a strong testimony that the church was true.
Yeah.
And it was just something that I wanted to do at that time. And
was it surprising? Is it what you thought it was?
It was nothing what I thought it was.
We don't talk about it outside, so you really aren't too prepared,
and
right?
nobody prepared me for it.
No.
My parents were very quiet about what to expect.
We all are. Really.
Yeah, and we were told to, it's sacred.
Right.
So you don't talk about
it.
sacred things,
That's
which
right.
is, I don't know, interesting. But it was really different.
Did you go back much after?
Yeah, I always had a temple recommend, and I was, I don't know how worthy I was to go, but I managed to get a recommend every time. So
answered the questions.
Right.
Are you totally honest in your dealings with your fellow man and stuff?
Yeah, I wasn't going on a mission. I wasn't getting married at that time. I just thought that would be a great thing to do. So
wasn't too much longer that you did get married.
Right, about a year later, I did get married
to Carl.
To Carl,
we've actually interviewed Carl before.
Right, we got married in the Bountiful Temple. Many of my family couldn't be there with us. I thought that was
that's
sad.
disappointing, isn't it?
My oldest brother wasn't active, and so he wasn't a part of the whole wedding. I want to call it a ceremony, but it's so that was kind of sad, but it is what it is. You know.
I always felt bad too for family and other things, but there was an element of pride in there.
Yes, definitely.
That kind of bothered me always, but I lived it. I was very proud that I could go and others couldn't, and so on. Did you feel that too?
I absolutely did. Yeah. Because I was worthy. Yeah,
and we judged others all the time for
I was very judgmental as a Mormon. I really that's one thing I really, really regret. I could have loved so many more people than I did. I could have served so many more people than I did if I had not been judgmental in that kind of way. So
interesting. So you get married and start having a family, and are you active at this point? Carl's active, and
we've always been active.
Okay, so you're serving.
I was what I call a checklist Mormon. I was doing everything I should have been doing, paying tithing, and as much visiting teaching as I could, which was difficult sometimes, but I was just doing everything I was supposed to be doing. I was fulfilling my callings. I was in the young women presidency.
I can imagine that you'd be a wonderful young woman.
I don't know. I think that was one of my least favorites. I think so.
I mean, that you would be someone the girls could look up to.
Yeah, probably. I was. Yeah, I did fine, but I never felt very comfortable in that position. I never felt like that was where God really wanted me. Now, I was in nursery and primary and those kind of things. You know, I do really good with kids. I was in the Relief Society presidency.
Did you enjoy
that? I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy that.
Well, something must happen along the way here. What kind of causes ripples in the water, as you might say?
You know, I think God kind of brought me to a point in the church where I was going just because that's what I had to do. I had to earn my salvation, I guess.
There wasn't any joy in what you were doing?
No, I didn't really find joy. It was just work, and I was not doing it for the Lord. I was doing it because I had to be doing it. I didn't feel any type of relationship at that point.
With God?
And I'm talking about even just a few years ago.
But are you saying your relationship with God or Jesus?
Yeah, I would go to church and I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything at the temple. I just, I almost just feel like God was bringing me to a point to prepare me for what was to come.
So you're just kind of going through the motions then.
Right, exactly.
So what kind of things was he preparing you with?
Well, I think he was preparing me for things that Carl was going to bring to my plate. Carl had been, my husband, had been looking into some of the historical things of the LDS Church, and I could tell that he was just getting ornery and bitter, and I'm like, what is going on?
He hadn't shared any of this with you at that point?
No, I didn't really know what was going on, and I picked it up eventually, and then he came to me and he asked if we could talk about it, and
what did he say?
I don't remember exactly. It's kind of a blur.
Did he have a checklist or a list of things? That's what I did with Carla, my wife.
He didn't really write anything down. He's got a pretty good memory compared to me. I have to write everything down.
Me too.
In fact, after leaving the church, I did make a list, and a list that ultimately ended up bringing me to Jesus Christ. So.
Do you remember some of the things, though, that he mentioned?
Yeah, so he mentioned, I was kind of aware that maybe Joseph Smith was a polygamist, but I didn't know that he had married young girls. I didn't know that he had married women who were already married. I thought that was very disturbing.
Yeah.
But I could live with that.
Yeah.
I really could have lived with that. It's just
If it had been
disturbing
just
history.
that,
Yeah. If it had been just that, right. But what ultimately got me was learning about the translation of the Book of Abraham and the Kinderhook plays.
Those were big for me too.
That made me question Joseph Smith as a translator for God.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over that. And then, everything else started pouring in, and it was wrong. It just felt wrong, and you feel guilty, learning these things.
In a way, you do.
But you can't avoid it once you're there. Either you have to accept it, or you have to say, you just don't accept it. It's not.
In order to be honest with yourself, right? You have to. Well, was it disturbing at first when Carl would mention, or your husband would mention this stuff to you? Was it shocking?
Oh, it was devastating. It
Yeah.
was really devastating.
How'd you deal with that?
I thought I knew about my church. I just didn't know these things. And whenever I hear people say, "Oh, that's been known for a long time," I think, well, where did I miss it? I wasn't ever
I
taught
listened to
these
General
things.
Conference, and
I
didn't
have books on my shelf that would have been filled with this information. So and I'm not really into researching on the internet, so I didn't know these things. Now I think it's all over the place, and I don't see how people can avoid it today,
And yet I think they do.
Yeah.
I think how long ago was all this?
I think it's been just over 2 years now.
That's all.
Yeah, and so from the time that Carl had brought these things to me, it took me 2 weeks of my own studies and research to decide that the church just is not a true church, because I could not believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God at that time.
That's a big moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you have to kind of, I say the word step back and just kind of look at it in a bigger picture, or how did you deal with that? Because that first moment of thinking, well, maybe this church isn't true, that's big, isn't it?
Well, I decided it couldn't be true. I mean, he was a false prophet, but at that point I was just lost and confused, and I was just left with emptiness. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell. But I had to find something. I had to believe in something, and about 10 years before we left the church, maybe even longer, we had started listening to Caleb on the radio. And Caleb is a Christian, mainstream Christian music, and just beautiful songs. And the messages in those songs are just all about Jesus Christ. And
you noticed that?
Yeah, in fact, being a Mormon and listening to those songs, they don't always line up with your theology that you know. So, but I did enjoy the music, and we went to concerts, and so we had a little taste of Christianity from those. And we also had certain people put in our life along the way, because my husband was in politics, and Christians are very conservative, and my husband was conservative, so they usually supported him, and he knew a lot of Christians, and we had friends who were Christians, but they never really talked to us about Christianity, but they were there, and they left little seeds here and there. And looking back, you can see how that also kind of helped, because we had people to go to when we got to that point. Many people don't. Many Mormons that leave the church don't have that association. They
I
don't
agree.
have the Christian music. They don't have Christian friends. And so many people who leave the church leave God because they don't have anything to go to. They don't have anything to anybody to talk to or learn from. And so I think that's one of the biggest focuses that we have at this point, is to try and catch some of those people who are on the verge of leaving the church, and maybe we can help them find Jesus Christ in that process.
You can see how God was working in your life
Right.
with friends and K-Love and things
Right.
that were kind of softening your heart probably, or at least making so that when the message did come, and I agree that it seems like all of us that have made this transition, we know more about the Mormon church now than we ever did before, and we have found a relationship with Jesus that we never had before, right?
Yeah, you know, I talk to Mormon friends now, and they're like, I have Jesus Christ, I know him, I have that personal relationship, but they don't know that they don't, you know, they don't know the difference.
That's right.
Until you're in this position and you've left and you're looking at it from the outside, you just don't see it.
Yeah.
And they don't see, I don't think my parents even have any Christian people in their whole circle of people.
So when if and when they would lose the relationship with the church, then they don't have a God relationship to fall back on.
Right. I think that's so important. So I feel very, very blessed that God had put those things into place in our lives, into my life. Ultimately, though, so we started attending Ephraim Church of the Bible, which is an excellent biblical church, and it's all about Jesus. I mean, we say that, it really is. It's shocking. The worship is amazing. And the music, it was another key thing in my life that, you know, I knew this Christian music, but then to go to church and actually hear it and sing it
and worship
through it, it's amazing. Just so amazing. I was at the point in the LDS church where I didn't even open a hymn book anymore. I tell Carl, if there's a organ at my funeral, I'm going to burn it, okay? I had such a difficult time. I couldn't worship the Lord through hymns that were just dry and sung at a very slow pace. I had a very hard time with that because I had been listening to Christian music that was so worshipful, you know. And anyway, so Ephraim Church of the Bible, but we also wanted to keep our foot in the door with the LDS Church because we wanted to make that transition slowly. And we wanted it to be easy on our kids. So you're going
to both of them?
Well, we wanted to.
Oh, okay.
So for one Sunday, we actually did do both churches, and then, or maybe a couple Sundays, but we went in to talk to the bishop, and we told him everything that we had been learning. And you could clearly see that wall just in front of his face, like he wasn't hearing hardly anything that we were saying.
I don't think he wanted to hear.
His eyes glazed over, and he would take a note here and there, but in the end, I had to be released from my calling. I was in the primary presidency at the time, and I remember we were teaching the Book of Abraham.
Oh, were you?
There was a scripture right up on the board behind me, and I had to be really. I couldn't do that calling.
And you knew about the Book of Abraham.
Yeah, it was the Book of Abraham.
To teach it. Oh boy.
I'm like, if it was the Bible, I totally could have, done it.
Got through it.
But I couldn't. So I asked to be released, and of course I had to be released at that point because we told them everything.
Yeah.
But so he asked me. He asked me to lie to my friends in the ward. If they were to ask me why I was being released from my calling, I was to blame it on we have 2 foster boys that have physical disabilities and are pretty demanding when I need to, I take care of them, but that wasn't why you were being released. That wasn't why I was being released.
But he wanted you to say that?
I couldn't believe that he was asking me to lie. This was my bishop. I still thought that he was an important person in the whole... Your bishop would not ask you to lie. So I was shocked. I was stunned. But at that point, I walked out of that room thinking, we aren't coming back. We can't come and lie to our friends.
Yeah.
If somebody asks us, we would be willing to tell them,
Sure,
the truth.
Yeah.
And so I think he was relieved probably after that we didn't return anyway. So,
did you ever have any of the ward members talk to you? Did they ask what happened?
No.
Yeah,
No, I think there's a lot of fear in people wanting to ask. I think there's a lot of curiosity, but nobody from that ward has come and directly asked us. I have some friends that I have talked to a little bit, but not in the kind of way that I would try and talk to my family or, somebody who was really, really close to me,
Well, so did you get a chance to talk to your dad or your parents about what you were?
So a couple months after that, word was out that we were going to be interviewed together as a couple by the Salt Lake Tribune.
The newspaper article.
Yeah.
What year? When did that come out? In case anyone wants to look that up.
2013.
It was a wonderful article. It had some great pictures and stuff.
Yeah, they actually came out to the church and
Right.
took photos at the Ephraim Church of the Bible. Anyway, word was coming out that was going to come out, and but I hadn't told my family, so I needed to tell my family right away that we had left the church. And so I wrote up this letter because I'm a letter kind of person. I can get all my words down and have it make sense in a letter.
Yeah.
So wrote this letter and sent it through email. And after I sent it, Carl's like, "It's April Fool's Day, Sherry." So I had to follow it up with a letter saying this is not a joke.
Oh dear.
But my family was devastated. My parents, they couldn't speak to me for about a month, and I think it was because they just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I think they were so heartbroken over the fact that their daughter, I was the good child, How could I? In fact, I think they fully thought it was Carl's fault completely, and they blamed him.
And
they
they
really
didn't
did.
want to probably ask any questions or
No,
get into details.
no.
Well, gosh, I think we're running out of time
Oh, no.
already. Isn't that terrible? I did want to ask you, though, about the things you feel now about, I know you've mentioned the music and the worshiping Jesus, and that is different, isn't it?
Yes.
Compared to your
it's
time as a
amazing.
Mormon. Grace, did you understand grace and works as a Mormon?
No, I had no idea. I thought that we had to earn salvation. I didn't,
It's all about what we do,
right.
what we're doing.
Right. But, if I were to share one thing with family and friends who were able to watch this, hopefully someday, I would want them to learn to trust the Bible, because the Bible, it's either all or nothing. Either you believe the Bible or you don't. And you can't just pick and choose certain verses out of the Bible and say, okay, that aligns with my
Mormon thinking.
Yeah, my Mormon thinking.
Yeah.
So, that makes sense. And that doesn't align, so that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And just ignore it. You can't do that. It's all or nothing.
I agree. Yeah.
Either you trust the Bible or you don't. And I tell Carl all the time, I'm like, why do they even have the Bible? Because I try to quote the Bible to them and they don't hear it.
And anything that doesn't line up, it just hasn't been translated correctly.
I guess so.
Yeah, they just don't. I actually went through and made a list of all my missionary scriptures after I came out and started looking at what they really were in context. I was really surprised. I'd challenge anybody to do that. But so your family has still probably not, it's been awkward or...
Yeah, it's very awkward. We don't talk about faith, religion at all. Yeah. They will make comments like, "Oh, we did this at church or this at church or whatever," and I'll kind of. We've invited them to our kids' baptisms, and they've come.
Oh, good.
So that is good. That's a step in a good direction.
Now, you were telling me an interesting story that your father was teaching.
Yeah, my dad is the gospel doctrine teacher in his ward, and I asked him if I could follow along. And this year, they're discussing the New Testament. Anyway, I thought that he thought maybe I would get something from it and return to the church because I would hear the truth, But instead, every week I do a write-up I read his lesson and then I write up what I learned from the Bible from that lesson, that they're discussing. And I send it back to them. Well, it's highly offensive. The Bible is very offensive.
Oh.
And the things that I try to explain, this is the way that the Bible is explaining this. It's not me explaining it. It's the Bible. It's the Word of God.
Right.
Well, it doesn't match up to their thinking, their Mormon thinking. And so...
So they're not really reading what
anyway,
you're
they aren't.
writing.
Yeah, they're no longer reading it. I think they're just too offended by it. But they know that I'm dedicated to it and that I really, really care about them. And so I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up. They know that. So.
Well, Carl must have been thrilled for you to respond the way you did, because some spouses don't. And so for you to be willing to learn and look, that must have been really encouraging for him. And your children, what do they think about going to church?
They love it. 5 years ago they fought. Sunday morning was a complete disaster in our house.
Trying to get the kids to...
It was awful. I was thinking about this last Sunday when we drove to church, and Carl is working on Sundays this summer, and so I had the kids by myself, and I thought how wonderful that morning went, where they were just so cooperative and so easy to get out of the house, and they were so excited to go to church. Really? It was just wonderful.
I've heard that before. Our children were raised when we made this transition, so I didn't get to experience that. But I've heard others say that the kids are excited, and they talk about Jesus, and it's all about Jesus and the Bible. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. Oh, it is.
And your personal life, the guilt, do you feel a freedom now that you didn't feel before?
I do. I
mean, the sins that we commit and guilt.
I think it's Romans 8:1 or 1:8. I'm terrible at memorization, but there's no condemnation in those who are in Christ Jesus. And so, I am forgiven. I'm forgiven for my sins, my past sins. I'm forgiven for my future sins. I'm forgiven.
That's a freedom that we don't...
And it's not a freedom to go and sin.
No.
It's a freedom for me to want to serve the Lord and to do good because I love Him. And He's in my life, and He has changed my life in so many positive ways. And He's changed our family's life. And He's changed, even my husband is a complete new person.
You've noticed a change in him.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? And we talked about pride and judging others. We just have a freedom to love people, love God, and to worship Him. He's such an awesome God, and I did never sense that as a Mormon. Well, Sherry, our time is up.
Okay.
You're such a delight and such a wonderful story, and I'm so grateful that you and Carl are able to do that together, and I praise my wife, Carla, for being willing to do that too. It's tough, but it's sure worth it, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.